At the start of the year 1110 AD, despite being at war with some of the more influential factions of the time, the Roman Empire had not been attacked, and allowed the generals of the Reclamation to finish making the final preparations before the Reclamation could continue once more. With Ioannes and his forces being stationed at Corinth Castle over the past winter, he knew he had to wait for his army to finish replenishing, but he was eager to be on the march. His agents reported that the Venetian castle of Ragusa, the first target for his reclamation of Roman lands in the west, lay undefended and a perfect opportunity. But he was also a patient man and would wait until he was at his full strength. Over in the eastern provinces, Alexios was glad to have scared off the Seljuk army without battle, and marshalled his army back to Baris to finish resting them and to recruit new men for the upcoming campaign. Hello everyone, I am your host Warrior Angel. Welcome back to part 6 of the Phoenix Rises, my narrative Let's Play from Medieval 2 Total War. Now in the last episode, Alexios managed to scare off the Seljuk army that was laying siege to Nicaea, and with that threat temporarily dealt with, I'm now going to have to go out of my way to make sure that his troops continue to get replenished ready for the eastern expansion. As you can see, a couple of them still have to be retrained to get them back to full strength, and I'm going to try and use the facilities of Baris in order to try and get them back up to full strength. I can't do it for all the units, because for example the Scoutator unit currently have no facilities in the eastern provinces to be able to retrain them and replenish, but I do the best I can. I did manage to get some Turkish javelin men, which was someone I was looking forward to recruiting, and I hired another priest because I figured I will be using them for the expansion in order to try and convert the populace over at Iconion back to the Orthodox faith. I did decide then I was going to try and use some of the other facilities in some of the other regions such as Constantinople to try and recruit some troops quickly as possible. As you can see, for example, I can recruit 4 units at a time in Constantinople, and it should take no more than a couple of turns for them to arrive at Baris, and from there then I'll be able to take them out and attack Iconion. Unfortunately, with the spending all that money means I haven't got much money to do anything else, including buying the brothel that I've been meaning to try and save up and buy, simply because having a spy in the eastern provinces will prove quite useful. But with everything else done then, in the east, I decided to head over to the west. Over in the western provinces now, first of all, I noticed that Ragusa is actually open for attack. This could be pretty useful for Ioannes, as not only is Ragusa the first target of opportunity for him to attack the Venetians, but it also looks like that it is an actual castle rather than a wooden castle. Same stage of development as Corinth itself is. This should hopefully allow me then to make better facilities there, such as the stables and archery range, in order to place the Iconion and allow me to get better tier troops. As you can see, in the meantime, before I could do that, I need to continue retraining the army. It's still going to take quite a few turns, but I do have a bit of a plan involving the cavalry units. My plan is to try and retrain all the infantry as quickly as possible before marching them up towards Ragusa, and from there then I'll be able to take the cavalry up after them, and with their higher amounts of movement points, they should be able to join up with the army in time. And while the army is on its march, you can also stop at several places such as Arta and that in order to make sure that all the ballistas in position and will allow me to attack the castle straight away rather than trying to wait for other siege equipment. Finally, and then before ending my turn, I just wanted to check out to see what my agents were doing. With Theophorus, I forgot that I actually negotiated with the Danish last turn, so I spent a minute trying to find out whether or not I actually did do anything with them because I forgot all about it. Couldn't see anything on the diplomat menu, so I decided, diplomacy menu, that I'd end up going to talk to them, and as you can see I actually had trade rights, obviously something I just did in the last turn and forgot completely about it. With that done, I'm now sending him up north to speak to the Norwegians. Hopefully that will give me another trade partner, if not another ally, and that would be quite handy for the western expansion and means less enemies to deal with. With Vakos now, with these ships moving away from Britain, he's kind of stuck up there. So I decided that since I wasn't going to actually come into conflict with the English for quite a while, I thought it might be worth talking to them for another trade partner, so I sent them to York. Now, as you can see, it's quite a poor relationship. We are very different from them, and the fact that I'm enemies with one of their allies, their enemies with one of my allies is not the best, so I decided to just go for trade rights, which they then accepted. With nothing else for him to do, I'm just planning to use him to go around Britain and try and get me the map information I'm interested in. Cosmas here is continuing his way down south, but between his aged merchant traits, he's not going to really get far, so I'm going to have to start thinking about if there's any other resources nearby that I can hopefully get him to try and start trading with, which will give me a bit of money rather than just wasting him trying to get down to those Silk roads. After moving him there with nothing else to do, I decided to go ahead and end my turn. As my turn finally came to an end, I noticed Paraskevos, so I forgot I was sent him actually to Ragusa. So I was hoping that he will be able to get in. If he can give me information about any garrison that might be there, although at the moment it doesn't seem to be the case, as well as be able to maybe open the gates for me. This could have been pretty useful and it would save me having to actually do the battle. Unfortunately though, as he got in, obviously he must have been spotted or something like that, and he ended up dying on me, which is very unfortunate, as you can imagine. At the start of the Seljuk Empire's turn, the first thing they decided to do was actually to attack me at Trebizond. Now, on the face of it, the balance of power is in their favour, and they do have a larger army. Although looking at the army details, as you can see, they've only got one unit of spear militia, which my own spearmen are better against, and a couple of units of Turkish archers instead. In terms of infantry, the rest of the army consists of these horse archers, as well as one or two melee cavalry, such as the Safari lancers. And I thought that I might have a chance. As you can see, my garrison consists of 2 units of Cortatoi spearmen as well as 3 units of Toxotai archers. I did hope for more, but unfortunately I wasn't able to recruit them with the fact that the castle was under siege. So with very little to lose, I decided to go ahead and fight this on the battle map. So I'll join you there, guys, in just a second. As the battle begins, as you can see, I decided to go over a very basic strategy in terms of where I wanted my troops. I put my Toxotai archers onto the walls to be able to attack the incoming army, and I put my Cortatoi spearmen down on the ground ready to deal with any threats as necessary. Looking at the 2 units heading towards me, I was more concerned about the battering ram. If the battering ram can get to the gate, then the enemy's mounted troops can get involved in the battle. Whereas if the ladder gets to the wall, then only the infantry, which mainly consists of Turkish archers as well as 1 unit spear militia, would be a problem. So I was hoping to try and eliminate the battering ram. Unfortunately though, it seems my Toxotais weren't focusing on the battering ram, instead of going after the Turkish archers trying to climb up on the wall. To try and deal with the threat of these archers, I did bring my Cortatoi spearmen up onto the wall, ready to try and engage the archers as they make their way up the ladders. My Cortatoi are much better than the Turkish archers are, so I thought that would be quite an easy conflict to deal with. In the meantime though, I sent the other 2 Toxotai units to try and eliminate that battering ram as well as the unit pushing it, but it seems that they were having problems actually targeting the ram. This is quite unfortunate because it meant then that with them only focusing on the units, unless they're able to kill as many of them as possible, they will actually bring the ram up. Despite the fact that all these fire arrows are shooting at them, the ram has not suffered any damage whatsoever. So I did try now to send my other unit of Cortatoi spearmen out. I thought, foolishly, that with the gates opening inwards when I move my troops out, that I might be able to attack them even though with the battering ram in place. Obviously though, that wasn't the case. My Cortatoi got stuck by the gate, and I had no choice but to just leave him there and hope that my Toxotais on the right side of the gate can actually kill off as much of the enemy spearmen as possible. Unfortunately though, they still couldn't make up their minds quite. Some of them were still trying to attack the Turkish archers despite them being on the other side, and some of the others were still trying to attack the ram even though they couldn't actually hit them. You can just look at the sheer amount of arrows that have actually appeared around my unit on the ground by the gate. As you can see though, they managed to get themselves into position, and I was hoping that by this point I might be able to eliminate them, but yeah. It's my arrows raining down on top of them. They weren't doing the casualties that I was actually hoping for. These spear militia managed to actually hold up quite well, despite the fact they got quite weak armor. Turkish archers now are coming up the ladders in force, hoping to try and drive back my units. Unfortunately for them, my spearmen are superior, and watching, as you can see, then their numbers are going down quite quickly. There's not much I could actually do now with that Cortatoi unit by the gate, so I put them in guard formation, and they are only going to be my hope because the battering ram now attacking the gate. It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to kill off that unit of spear militia in time. So with nothing else to be able to do, best I could do is bring down the Cortatoi that was on the wall, bring them back down now towards the gates to try and deal with the threat of the incoming units, as they will charge the gate once the gates open. And I have to try and rely on my Toxotes in order to try and eliminate as many of the enemy as possible. The Byzantine militia is going down slowly but surely. 37 men and counting, but unfortunately it's not going to do the job. I think that by this point, yep, the gates are 84%, a couple more hits, and the gate will be down, and the enemy's mounted troops will charge in. Just to try and get them in position, I did start getting my spearmen into place, and they are still raining arrows, but 3 units of Toxotes aren't doing the job that I was hoping. And despite the fact a lot of arrows are raining down, it didn't stop them. In fact, now the territory now marched out towards the gate to try and now finally deal with the spear militia. But with the gates now opened, all of the enemy's mounted troops, including both the melee and, funny enough, a lot of their horse archer units, decided to come in and actually attack. I was hoping that my Katoratoi, despite the fact they aren't the best in missile thing, I was hoping that they would do reasonably well against the mainly mounted cavalry units. But unfortunately I don't think that was the case, so I did send my Katoratoi in. I was hoping these 2 units would be able to hold the enemy at the gate, forcing them to try and not use their superior numbers, while my Toxotes continue to rain fire in from above, hopefully trying to deal as many casualties as possible. Come on, men, push these dirty Turkish bastards out of the gate. Give them no quarter. As long as we hold these gates, men, Trebizond will be safe, our wives and children will be safe. And I don't know about you lads, but the last thing I want when I go into the afterlife is to hear my wife nagging at me because we couldn't hold them back. So fight on, men, fight hard, and we will win the day. With that inspirational speech given by Captain Apollonius and my garrison force, we come back to the battle. As you can see, my spearmen are still holding the gate, but the sheer mass of enemy troops pushing their way through is driving my men back slowly but surely. Thankfully, they only seem to be using their Turkish archers as well as their light missile cavalry, which means that my spearmen still got the advantage in the fight. I do have one unit that seems to be focused on as much on the wall as they are on the enemy troops, so I decided to drive them in. And while my spearmen are trying to hold the gate, I am using my Toxotes up on the walls to try and rain down arrows on them, hoping to try and kill some of them. In fact, the strategy seems to be working long enough that only half the enemy force remains, despite the fact that I lost the gates. Unfortunately though for me, the enemy bodyguard has managed to make their way up to the front line. These are the best melee units in the whole battle, so it's no surprise that my spearmen are not going to last long against them, especially with the other troops involved. As you can see now, Apollonius isn't feeling confident of victory. He feels that unless God himself can help, they are not going to win. And in fact, it's not long now until he actually starts to retreat. He flees the battle. Unfortunately though, given his position, there's nowhere for him to actually retreat except through the enemy, and so he will shortly be dying, especially as you can see on the bottom there. He's only got 5 men left in the unit, and there we go, now he's now dead, the official warning. The other spearman unit has still got about 40 men or so, but unfortunately they're still not in a position to be able to hold the enemy back. And it's now going to be down to my Toxotes archers to try and continue raining down and to kill off as many of the enemy as possible. Okay, only half my force now remains. This is going to make things a little bit difficult, but I should hopefully still be able to manage. With my spearmen now dead or running away, the enemy has actually managed to stop. Maybe it's because they tried to give their troops a chance to rest, although a couple of their missile cavalry are now heading towards my undefended courtyard. But I'd use the opportunity instead to try and kill off as many of the bodyguard units as possible. I do have 3 units of over 100 Toxotes archers in each unit to try and attack, so with all those arrows coming down, as you can see, the bodyguard is taking quite a few hits, and they are going to be taking casualties slowly but surely. And in the meantime, those that they aren't killing with the bodyguard, any missing arrows are going to be hitting the nearby Turkish archers units instead. It's this point now that the bodyguard decided to move forward, maybe in an attempt to try and secure the courtyard along those 2 Fari cavalrymen who managed to make the way over. I've only got 3 minutes now though and 50 seconds before I automatically lose the battle because I'm capturing the castle. But unfortunately for me, I'm not really in a position where I can move my troops away from their secure position up on the walls without them getting attacked. So I did have a slightly cunning plan involving the unorthodox use of one of my archery units. I was originally going to try and send the Toxite units up on the far right side of the gate round to try and attack those bodyguard in the centre with their arrows, but I thought it might be slightly better if I do something else instead. I go back down towards the gate, where I'll be using the Toxite unit as melee troops. I'm hoping to try and get them to attack the Turkish archers down by the gate. It seems that I still have a clear advantage in terms of men. I was hoping that I would be able to use that Toxite unit to try and drive the enemy back. Well, since they're better melee troops, are now actually at the courtyard. Once they were eliminated, I was hoping that I can start bringing all the Toxites to try and use their overwhelming firepower against those cavalry units back in the courtyard. So with that, my Toxite unit now charges in, where with the hand axes, and you can see that they're actually not going to be doing too bad. It seems that my Toxites are still better troops than their own spears. So it's just a case though with everyone wavering and shaken, who is going to win first? Who is going to actually be the first to run away? As you can see then, a few seconds later, it was actually my Toxite unit that ran away. Now this was really annoying, especially given the fact they were actually winning the fight before they decided to run away. I wasn't sure why they did. If I had to guess, I think it's just down to the morale loss they suffered due to Captain Apollonius being killed. But it meant then that I was slightly concerned about enemy cavalry, the skirmishing cavalry that were left, trying to go after them. But thankfully, thanks to the Toxite archers on the walls, a bout of arrows from them managed to drive, first of all, kill off the skirmishing cavalry that remained on the ground, as well as drive back off the bodyguard. Now, I was happy to let this Toxite unit head towards the centre, because once they reached the courtyard, they would hopefully be able to stop the timer thing and allow me so I don't automatically lose the battle. It's only 60 men though, but I was hoping that even if they had to fight the bodyguard in hand-to-hand combat, I should still hopefully have a bit of an advantage. Just had to wait for them then to hopefully get towards the centre. In the meantime, I allowed my Toxites on the wall to continue trying to kill off the archers stationed on the ground. One unit already started retreating, and the only one really left, there's a unit outside the gates, as you can see in the distance. And a couple of units stationed right in the gate itself. This is going to be quite annoying for my archers, as it means that it's going to be quite difficult for me to get them into position. And in fact, I started moving them away from the walls in the hope that I can actually either attack them better or help attack the centre. My Toxite unit that was retreating has now actually stopped, and it was a case now of trying to rush them towards the courtyard as quickly as possible. I've only had 26 seconds left at this point to try and actually get to the courtyard. I think they managed to get there in about 10 seconds, so I was left with about, well, I think it was about 10 seconds left on the clock, in fact, before their timer ran out. But they managed to secure the courtyard from the enemy bodyguard, but it meant then that the bodyguard unit decided to charge straight into the troops. Now they of course had the opportunity to replenish their forces and their strength, so they're now at an eager stance, and they just charged straight into the Toxite unit, which as you can see are very tired at this point and suffered quite big morale losses. There wasn't really much I can do though, so I was forced to try and bring the Toxite that I had on the wall closer towards the fight up at the courtyard, hoping that I was going to try and at least cause some casualties with the enemy, with the bowfire, or even try and get them into hand-to-hand combat, where I'm hoping that despite the fact that the enemy bodyguard is quite superior in hand-to-hand combat compared to the archers, that just having so many of them should do the job. A little bit later on, as my troops start to get into position, my second in command tells me that defeat seems almost certain. Now these are not inspiring words to hear, but I still feel confident in victory at this point, despite what the AI thinks. I still try to get my troops into position, although the larger unit of Toxite seems to have actually started to retreat thanks to the enemy bow fire from behind. I feel confident though that I will kill this bodyguard. As you can see, his defeat seems certain for the 3 men against my unit of 22, but despite that, my unit continues to run away. It is quite fortunate for me though that as a defender in a siege battle, my troops automatically retreat towards the courtyard, where they will automatically stop and regroup. So despite the fact that the bodyguard managed to drive them off a couple of times, I was still able to bring my troops into conflict, and while they might have been able to deal with maybe the 18-20 men I had left out of the smaller group, all of a sudden against 81 of the larger ones, the enemy bodyguard hasn't got any chance. So they charge in regardless, trying to drive off my troops. And my hatchets do the job though. Thanks to the fact though that the enemy has such high health and armor, it does take a long time for me to try and kill off these bodyguard units. In fact, you can see that surrounded by men, I managed to kill one. And it took quite a long time at this point for me to try and even kill the second one, leaving the enemy captain, who's still taking hits, as you can see from the fact that he's constantly getting rocked back by the blows. But unfortunately, though, it's still taking a long time. And during this attack, though, the other unit in the far back is getting attacked by Turkish archers at the gate. But I was going to have to consider dealing with those after I'm done with the bodyguard, and I can bring all the Toxote units to deal with the threat. Now the second bodyguard is gone, there's only the captain left, and he's now finally dead. So now I have to try and deal with the archers at the gatehouse. I did try and bring all my troops down, because I was hoping that, with the fact that I think at this point I did outnumber them, that I was hopeful that I could actually drive them off, given the fact their captain has just been killed. So it took a little while then for my troops to get into positions. One of them, the nearest one, can attack, although they've been taking hits for a little while. So we'll join back in a second once my other troops get into position. About half a minute later, my troops are finally now in a position to try and attack these Turkish archers at the gate. Now I was hoping that my Toxote would have the advantage. There was more of me than there are of them. As you can see down in the little corner there, I've got nearly 140 men. Which against the much lesser Turkish troops, at that point I think they had about 110 men altogether, or maybe a bit less. So I was pretty confident. In fact, I decided to fast forward time just to try and see whether or not that would work. Unfortunately though, it didn't seem to be the case. I still had Toxote constantly retreating and my troops weren't doing that much damage to them, no doubt because so many of their forces are still behind the gatehouse, which will defend them against a lot of my arrows. So at this point I tried to get my troops to charge into melee, but because of their status it meant that all of them started running away and I actually lost the battle. Actually, looking at this, I had 200 men left of the enemies to deal with and 104 of mine. Still managed to do quite a few casualties, but unfortunately it means that I lost and Trebizond is no longer mine. As my turn came up yet again, I did feel a bit miffed at this point about the fact that I lost Trebizond, but I still felt pretty comfortable about the campaign and I know I'll be able to capture it later on. In the meantime though, I've got a new prince for Theodora to consider marrying, and although Christodoulos doesn't look too bad in terms of traits, he's not really the sort of person I want to marry her to. I have plans for her to marry her to one of the other factions, and so I decided to decline his offer. Once that was dealt with, it's now time to spend in my money. I do have a nice little sum in the bank now, 8,000 florins. I should say treasury, shouldn't I, not bank. And the first one I decided to do is go to Nicaea, a castle at the moment which is on its own little island. And I decided that instead of having it as a castle, I'm going to convert it over to a town. My reasoning is for the same reason that I did with the other ones, such as roads, is that as a castle, any troops I'm going to have to recruit will have to be ferried over to the mainland, whereas I'd rather have it as a town, which will give me a lot more money to deal with and play with in the future. Over in the eastern mainland though, I now bring Alexios down to Baris in order to retrain his men. Still going to take 2 more turns, this turn and next turn, to bring them all up to full strength. But once that's done, I can start bringing the army out in order to attack Iconion directly and recapture those provinces of Iconion and Ankara, ready for me to carry on with the eastern expansion. Going back to Constantinople, I've now bringing those troops I recently recruited down towards Baris in order for them to join up with the army. Still going to take a couple of turns though, and after deciding which ones I was going to exactly bring, it's going to still take 3 more turns for them to go down to Baris. More than enough time for them to be able to follow up behind the army, and I can maybe use them as a garrison, maybe use them to replenish the forces and see what happens. Limanos now comes down to join with the force in Baris as well. Once Amentas takes over the governorship of Iconion, I plan to use Limanos as my second commander so I can actually give him a proper army. And then take the opportunity just to go through some of the other towns and that, making sure that everything I want is done. I did use Smyrna as a place to build ballista, because I thought they would be close enough to my other recruitment areas that it should be able to come in handy. And the ballista will allow me to actually attack the other walled settlements such as Iconion or Ankara without me having to worry about building up siege equipment in the meantime. Meanwhile, over in the western provinces, the situation is very similar. I'm still waiting for Ioannes and his forces to continue being retrained down in Corinth before I can start sending them up to capture Ragusa, so it's still going to take another turn at the very least. But I have got a plan behind the madness. As you can see, and I've mentioned earlier in the episode, I believe, I am retraining my infantry first, because they are the slower units out of those currently there. And once I start sending them off, I can then take the cavalry up to join them quite quickly. Once all that done is really done in the western provinces, I just check out my agents once more. Vakos over in England is still continuing just to go through the country and making sure I can pick up more information for the map, which will hopefully help me out when I come to actually invade England in the far future. Down in the Sahara, my merchant Mitros is still doing pretty well. In fact, looking at this, he's actually recruiting more gold than he was before. He's managed to gain quite a few traits, such as graceful traveller as well as settled merchant, which really helps his finance skill and ensures that it will be more difficult for people to try and take him off that, should they try to reclaim those gold mines for himself. Cosmus, though, my other merchants,
Ready to trade.
as I said earlier, it's going to take a long time for me to try and get him to join the Silk Roads. So at this point, I am deciding about maybe taking him to one of the other resources in the area. There looks like to be some quite nearby, although there's one lot of cotton right next to him. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get much from that, only 10 florins a turn if I remember right. So I decided to send him a little bit more west instead, maybe to try and see how much resources I can get from there. And I better hurry up with him, as he's not going to be lost too long the way he's going. At this point, assuming that everything was done, I decided to go ahead and end the turn. I did forget about moving Theophorus as he continues to head north to speak to the Norwegians, but the AI was happy to do this for me since I already told him to head up that way, and it's still going to take a couple of turns before he can arrive at the Norwegian capital. At the start of my next turn now, let's just go through the reports. I am not doing so bad in terms of money, although I have lost my position as the leader in terms of production on the game so far. The Holy Roman Empire has now become the most advanced faction, and a couple of my other characters and generals and governors, etc. have gained a couple of traits, but nothing really important it seems. And most importantly though is the fact that my allies, the Hungarians and the Republic of Venice, have now become allies. This is going to be slightly annoying, but it does mean that hopefully I'm not going to have another one of my allies trying to steal territory from me. Speaking now of the Western invasion, I decide now to send Ioannes up towards Ragusa in the attempts to try and capture this castle. As you can see though, I still got a unit of Scattersoy being built, and I still got one unit of Katoratoi Spearmen to retrain, but I'm pretty comfortable about my chances with such a strong army. So I stick with my original plan. I'm going to leave the units of Mounted Aquitae as well as the Boya Cavalry. I'm planning to leave them behind so they can retrain, get themselves back up to full strength, and with their superior movement, we'll be able to quickly catch up on the army in the upcoming couple of turns. So with everything else in a position, I decided to start sending the army up. It's still going to take a number of turns for them to actually get up to there, or a couple of years in game time. As you can see, another 3 turns will be required before I can even attempt to try and lay siege to the castle. But it still gives plenty of time for my cavalry to finish retraining, as well as the Scoutatoi, and I'll be able to bring up my ballista from Arta over to join the army as well, which will allow me then to actually attack the castle directly. Like I said earlier in the episode, Ragusa seems to be an actual third tier castle, the same level as Corinth. So capturing that will allow me to eventually get access to the higher tier stables compared to Dehatium, something will be quite useful in terms of the western expansion, as well as a bastion against any attacks from the western provinces. Men, we have spent the past year waiting for this opportunity, a chance to rest and see your families once more. But I can see that you're eager to march once more, to deal with those upstart Venetians who thought they would be able to attack our ports and not face any repercussions. Let's see how they feel when they hear our footsteps upon that land, and face the strength of our arms in battle. But this is only the first step. The Venetians are simply in the way at our journey to secure Italy and the city that once ruled the world, Rome itself. So march with me, men, and together we will walk on those fabled streets of our ancestors. To Rome! With all the troops now moving from Corinth Castle heading towards Ragusa, I'll take an opportunity first of all just to continue retraining some of my drommen that are forming a part of the fleet and took some severe casualties trying to attack the Venetians in the previous turn. I'll have a quick look around, see if there was anything else I needed to do over in the western provinces before I head over now to the east. First of all though, I want to go to Constantinople because I want to try and sort out what I'm going to be doing with my princess, Theodora. As you can see, despite only being 15 years old, she's a very charmful young woman. And I've got plans for her. I want to try and use her to secure my alliance with the Hungarians. So in a twist of fate, the opposite of what happened really with the Byzantine Empire in real life, since in real life my Ioannes actually married a Hungarian princess. I'm going to try and marry a Byzantine princess to the Hungarians. Hopefully this will secure my alliance in the north and will stop any attacks from coming up there. Over in the east now, I need to try and convert a lot of the population over in Iconion over to the Orthodox faith. This will really help me out in regards to try and sort out public order issues. First of all, religious unrest. So I decided to send three priests, one of which is a bishop, over to Iconion. Having three bishops in the region should hopefully be able to convert the populace over to my faith a lot quicker and be able to allow my troops to not have to stay there for as long before I can actually move them on to continue attacking the western front. I've still got the situation though where a couple of my units still need to be retrained, but unfortunately I haven't got the facilities at Baris to actually do it, especially with regards to the Toxote. So I take the opportunity now to try and merge some of the soldiers instead, just in order to try and get so at least I have a couple of units to full strength. Unfortunately though, I still haven't got enough in terms of actual Toxotes, so I'm going to have to rely a bit on the reinforcements brought from Constantinople to join up with the army, although that won't be happening until next turn. Once those reinforcements that are currently on the screen can actually arrive at Baris, I'll be able to actually go over to Iconion and continue with the fight. I do take the opportunity though just to check out Alexios. It does seem that despite the fact that it's been a couple of turns, he's still feeling the loss of his men after that battle. This is going to be slightly annoying. It means I might have to consider putting him into a more administrative role, rather than continuing him as the leader of the Eastern expansion. It just depends on how well he's willing to become a general, despite the losses he's suffered. But the money now that I've got in now as well, I decided I'm just going to have a quick look around the other towns and both the east and the west to see if there's any new buildings I can try and think about building. Over in the east, I'm pretty fine. I've got blister making happening in Smyrna, a grain market happening in Messenia, so I'm pretty comfortable with how the situation is with those eastern provinces. With the islands, I've got a couple of things I can try and build, I guess, but really there's nothing there. They've got grain markets and that, and apart from maybe building some dirt worlds that might help a little bit with regards to the trade, there's not really much I can do. In fact, I don't even need to build any churches, since it seems that the Orthodox faith is quite strong in those areas. The roads I've decided to go ahead and build won't do that much, but every little bit helps and will give me some extra money. It's just have to wait now for them to upgrade to the next tier of town before I can actually do anything proper with them. Unfortunately though, this is something that's going to have to take a little while before I can actually do it. In the meantime though, I continue going for the other regions, such as Adrianople. I went ahead and retrained some of the troops currently stationed there, since they would be pretty useful against that rebel army that seemed to have appeared up in the slightly to the north yet again. And I went to Constantinople, where I decided I'm going to build a shipwright next in order to get myself the superior navy ships to be able to use against the Venetians at the moment, or any other enemies I come across. I was tempted as well to queue up a merchant wolf, with the fact that I'm getting quite a bit of money from trade, and a little bit more once that shipwright has been built. I thought that building a merchant wolf will allow me to have more trade fleets and get a little bit of extra money, but for the moment I decided to save what I had and wait until a bit later. With all that done now, I just take the opportunity to just deal with my agents. Theophilus is continuing to head up north towards the Norwegian capital. I'm hoping to try and at least get some more trade rights with them. If not be able to get an outright alliance, since any more allies up in the north will be quite useful once I start to deal with the Holy Roman Empire. Vakos now over in Britain is continuing to try and find his way around just to try and give me a bit more map information. It's unfortunate that I won't be able to actually get him over the channel to come into France because, well, it just means that he's going to be stuck there for the meantime. I can't do anything else with him. I can't disband him or anything, so he's just stuck there until he eventually dies, or I decide to try and send a ship over. Over then with Cosmus, I'm deciding to try and send him a bit further to the east. There seems to be some sort of resource. I couldn't really tell what it is right now, and I'm not sure what it is. But I thought that it might be useful to try and get him there and start getting some more money in, rather than waste quite a few more turns to try and get him down to the Silk Roads further south. Unfortunately, though, it's going to take a little while, though, especially with this new army that seems to have sprung up in the way. But it shouldn't be that bad. The final thing I decided to do before I went ahead and ended the turn was just go through the provinces that happen to be by the sea and for access to a port, in order to try and build a few more ships, some drommen in particular. It seems that I did have a bit of an issue with the Venetians before, as you would have saw in the last episode, if I remember right, where they had a stronger navy and managed to pretty much wipe out mine and almost killing off one of the ships completely. So with that in mind, I decided just to go through the other regions that have access to ports and try and build a couple more drommen before I ended my turn. At the start of my next turn, I just take a second to go through the pop-ups in the corner, check out the end of return report as well to see what buildings and my troop situation has been going on. And it was this point that I decided to bring this episode to a close. So in the next episode, both Ioannes and Alexios are going to carry on with their plans for expansion, with Ioannes aiming for Ragusa in order to gain a foothold over in the western provinces and secure better facilities, whereas over in the east, Alexios is now going to attack Iconion and reclaim it once more for the Empire. How will these go? Tune in next time for the next episode of The Phoenix Rises. With their armies close to reaching full strength, Alexios and Ioannes once more would take the steps towards reclaiming the lands of the Empire. Ioannes marched towards Ragusa Castle, taking his time so that Minsal cavalry will be able to join him once the new recruits have finished being trained to Corinth Castle. His heart sung as his army moved closer towards Ragusa, one more step towards reclaiming the heart of the Roman Empire once the upstarts that have claimed Italy for their own have been dealt with. With Alexios, though, his thoughts were troubled by the advice of his advisors regarding dealing with the people on Iconion once he captured the town once more. In particular, his adopted son Lemonos advocated a bloody resolution, which conflicted greatly with Alexios' beliefs and his feelings towards more bloodshed. Once he captured Iconion, he would decide the best course of action.